Hi friends, it's Julie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm finally here with a reading check-in video for you guys. I know I haven't filmed one of these in quite a while because I've been in such a slump, but I am finally out of it. Yay! And I've already finished 5 books this month. Now, granted, I had started a few of those books previously before October, but still, I have finished 5 books, which is typically about how much I read per month, like normally. So I'm pretty proud of myself because I still have a few weeks left in October, but I just wanted to let you guys know the books that I have finished recently, what I'm currently reading, and what I plan on picking up soon. So to start it off, I finished 2 fantasy books, and one of those was, of course, Madship by Robin Hobb. I finally finished this. It took me a couple months, but for some reason, I really like to read her books slower. I think it's just so I can just really savor the book. And this one was just, oh my gosh, it is so good. Like, I love this trilogy so much. Like, I know I have said that before, but it is really, it's just absolutely incredible. And I really hope to finish the 3rd book before the year is out. I think Katie and I are planning on starting it in November. We read the Farseer trilogy last year, and we really want to finish this trilogy this year so we can move back on to Tawny Man next year. But man, guys, once I finish this trilogy, I will do a whole trilogy review on it because more people need to read this. It's just absolutely incredible. The characters are amazing. Like, there are so many strong female characters in this trilogy, and I think that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. Like, Althea has become one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, and I just love the setting and just absolutely everything about it. So yeah, I will definitely be doing a full trilogy review once I finish this one, but I just love it so much. And then the other fantasy book I finished was Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castell, and this is the first book in his Greatcoats Quartet, and I loved this. It was so fun, and it was almost perfect for me. I had one little criticism, which I will mention in just a bit, but I just want to kind of tell you what this book is about. So this is like a Three Musketeers type retelling, except for instead of being called the Musketeers, they are called the Greatcoats, and they are like the king's like hand-picked protectors. And at the beginning of this book, we discover that the king that they were serving is dead, and this country is now being ruled by like the dukes and the duchesses, and they are all pretty terrible people. I mean, they do really terrible things. And the Greatcoats have kind of been disbanded, and they're just spread out throughout this world, and our main character is this man named Falcio, and we are following him and his like 2 best friends as they are searching for these things that their king wanted them to find. So even though their king is dead, they're still going on this quest because, they will forever serve him. And along the way, they get caught up in all these terrible scenarios, and it's really fun. It's super fast-paced. There are lots of twists and turns. There were some fun reveals at the end, and I just can't wait to continue on with this series. My only criticism of it was I felt that the world building was a little bit lacking. Like, for me, when I read a fantasy, I want to really be able to visualize the world in my mind, and I couldn't really do that with this one. There was just a little bit of lack of world building, but this is the first book in a quartet, so I'm sure we will get more of it. But other than that, I absolutely loved it. And the last thing I want to say is I think that this would be a great starting point for somebody who is wanting to branch over from YA fantasy to adult fantasy, because it is so fast-paced and so plot-driven. There isn't a complex magic system or anything like that. So I think it'd be a good branch over. Now, I'm saying that even though I haven't finished the series, obviously, but after reading this first book, I think it would be a good starting point for somebody. So yeah, can't wait to continue on with this series. And now moving on to the suspense and psychological thrillers that I have been reading. So the first one that I finished was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. And this book was recommended to me by Rachel and April, and I am so glad that I took them up on this recommendation because it was awesome. I loved this book. It was such a mind trip, and I love books like that. And I think this is one of those books that is seriously best to just go into blindly. Like, all I knew about it was about a couple who was going on this trip, and they were going to visit the boyfriend's parents. And really, that's all I knew. And that's all I think you really need to know. It is so suspenseful. Like, the entire time you're reading it, you just have this sense of dread and that something terrible is going to happen, even though nothing super bad is happening. You just have this feeling. And I buddy read this with Katie from Life Between Words, and we had such a fun time kind of bouncing theories off of each other, and we finished this book in like 2 days. It was such a fast read. And another thing that I find really interesting about it is I've heard people say that they could reread this book, or that they have reread it. And for some reason, like for me, like typically I don't ever want to reread like mysteries or psychological thrillers. I don't feel the need to, because I'm like, well, I already know how it's going to end. But this is definitely one of those books that you could reread and get more out of it, like the next time. It was so brilliantly like written. Oh, it was so good. And then unfortunately, I picked up a few books that just really weren't my cup of tea. And the first one was Under the Harrow by Flynn Barry. Now this is the book that was picked out for me when I went to visit Katie and we went to that little mystery bookstore. And I had high hopes for this one because the lady told me, you know, it's really dark, I think you'll enjoy it. And there were some darker elements, but I just didn't really end up enjoying it. So this book is about this woman named Nora who one night she's going over to her sister's for dinner. And when she gets to her sister's house, she discovers that she's been brutally murdered. And so Nora becomes kind of obsessed with her sister's case and finding out what happened to her. And while she's doing this, she discovers that her sister was keeping some secrets from her and things like that. Now, I did really enjoy the writing. I think that, you know, being a debut author, I think that she has some potential, and I would read another book that she writes in the future. It's just, unfortunately, this one just didn't do it for me. I just didn't think that it was really executed that well. It's definitely not twisty. Like, it's not a psychological thriller. This would be more of just a straight up mystery, because there really is no way to figure out who murdered her until the end. So do know that going in if you decide to pick this one up. But for some reason, even though I enjoyed her writing, I felt like the entire time I was kind of kept at a distance from the characters, so I never really felt connected to them. I never really cared what happened. And at one point in this story, I thought that it was going to go a certain way, and I'm like, yes, this would be such a good twist. But then it didn't end up going that way. So unfortunately, this one just didn't do it for me. And then the other thriller that I read was one I got from NetGalley, and that was Best Day Ever by Kara Ruda. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And I think I'm in the minority here when I say that I didn't really enjoy this book. Now, this is another book about a couple who is going on like a night away, you know, to try and kind of rekindle their flame and their marriage because they've went through a little bit of a rough patch. And so the husband, Paul, has designed this whole like best day ever for his wife, and it doesn't end up being the best day ever, let's just say that. But this whole book is set over a 24-hour period, so I was expecting it to move pretty quickly, but unfortunately this book moved really slow for me. I didn't really feel any of that suspense and stuff that everyone else seems to feel while they read this book, and so I just didn't really end up enjoying it. I found myself like skimming the last like 80 pages because I just wanted it to kind of, I just wanted to figure out what was going to happen. And I think part of the reason why I just really didn't enjoy this book was I hated the main character. Like, he was so unlikable. And that's okay for me sometimes, but I'm discovering that while I do enjoy a good villain or unlikable character, there has to be some sort of redeeming quality to them for me to, I have to feel connected to them in some way. So they have to be like funny or really smart or kind of witty or do something that isn't terrible. But I just straight up hated Paul. Like, I hated him. And so I think this is just more of a personal thing because I do have to feel some sort of connection to the main characters, and I just didn't. Like, I hated him. And so I think that's why I didn't enjoy this book as much as other people seem to. I do know that Lisa from Books and Smiles read this book, and she really enjoyed it. So I do think that I'm in the minority here, and I think other people will probably really enjoy this one as, like, you know, a new domestic thriller to check out. And now moving on to the books that I'm currently reading. The first one is The Witching Hour by Anne Rice. I'm about 100 pages into this one. I'm buddy reading this with Sean from Eclectic Reads, which I love buddy reading with Sean. And so far, I'm really enjoying this. Like, her writing is absolutely beautiful. Like, it's so beautiful without being, like, pretentious. I really enjoy reading it. I understand why so many people love her now, and I just can't wait to get into, like, the meat of this book. Like, I'm only 100 pages into it, and it's like a 1,000-page book, so I'm not really into the thick of it yet. I don't really know where the story's going, but so far I'm enjoying it. And then the other book I'm reading is Growth by Jeff Jacobson. Now this is the book, the horror novel that I picked up when I was in Chicago. It was written by a local Chicago author and I had never heard of this before at all, but it sounded absolutely terrifying. It's about this genetically modified corn that when people eat it, it causes this fungus to grow inside of them and pretty much eat them from the inside out. So it sounded like it was going to be pretty graphic, and so far there is definitely some body horror in this book, and it is definitely pretty creepy. I'm about 100 pages into it, and I'm enjoying it. When I picked this one up, I thought that it might be kind of similar to The Troop, and since starting it, his writing is very similar to Nick Cutter's. It's very straightforward and easy to read, and I'm just excited to really get into this and figure out, like what's going to happen, because it's pretty scary. And then next are the books that I plan on getting to very soon. I went a little bit crazy at the library, so I'll just briefly share them with you guys. I really hope to get through all of them either in October or November. But the first one is Hex by Thomas Oldhovelt. I completely probably butchered that name, I'm sorry. But this book has been on my TBR for a long time, and then it got bumped up when I heard Stephanie from That's What She Read talking about it on her channel. She just read this and she said it's in like her top 10 favorite horror novels, so I'm like, I need to read this book now. And this is a story about this little small town who's being terrorized by this witch who her mouth and her eyes are like sewn shut, which just sounds absolutely creepy. But I know that this book is set in like a modern town, so there's elements of like social media and stuff and like how those come into play with everything that's going on. That's all I really know about it, but it just sounds really creepy. And then these next two are books that I picked up on the limited loan shelf, so I'm really hoping that I can get to them in the next 2 weeks or else I have to return them. And the first one is The Childfinder by Renee Denfeld. Now, I read The Enchanted by Renee Denfeld either last year or the year before that, and I really enjoyed it. Her writing was just so beautiful. And so when I heard that she'd come out with a new book, I'm like, I need to read this one. And I believe that this is about a couple kids who go missing in this town, and these parents hire this detective to find them who's supposed to be like the best, and they're called the Childfinder. And that's really all that I know, but that's all I need to know, because if it's written by Renee Denfeld, then I definitely want to check it out. I just really enjoyed her writing in The Enchanted. And then the other book I have is See What I Have Done by Sarah Schmidt. Now this is a Lizzie Borden retelling, and I have just been into true crime since I was a little girl, and Lizzie Borden was somebody that I actually did a report on in school, which I'm really surprised that my teacher let me do a report on her, but anyway, that's what happened. And when I heard that this book was coming out, I knew I had to read it, and this is another book that Stephanie from That's What She Read has read and really enjoyed. Now this doesn't have the best reviews on Goodreads, but I still really want to give it a try. And then the final book I have is one that I will be saving for the end of the month, and that is The Devil Crept In by Anya Alborn. Now I read Brother by Anya Alborn a couple months ago, and I think that I enjoyed it. I mean, it was the darkest, most disturbing book I have ever read, but when I finished that, I was like, I need to read everything that she has ever wrote, because I love finding female authors who are super dark and twisty. For some reason, I just really enjoy that. And this was the other one of her books that really called out to me, because I think it might be about a serial killer. I'm not sure, I could be completely wrong, but I have to read everything that she's ever wrote, and this is the next book that I want to read, but I'm saving it for the end of the month, because after reading Brother, I needed like a palate cleanser. Like I needed something that wasn't dark or anything, so I'm afraid that if I read this book too early that I won't get to all of these other thrillers and things that I want to read. So I'm going to save this one for the end of the month, just in case that happens again, but I'm really looking forward to checking this one out. So those are all of the books that I have read recently and what I'm currently reading. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them, or if you have read anything good and scary this month. I would love to know. But I think that's it for the day, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all again very soon. Happy reading. Bye.